everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make some soft white sandwich bread. I was actually looking at some recipes for Amish white bread and they looked very good. All the recipes were pretty much the same and the videos had the same ingredients as well. And they looked good, but I was concerned that they had far too much sugar in them. So I carried on searching and looking around, and I came across a recipe on a website called Feast and Farm, which looked quite good. However, the pan that she used was 9 inches by 5 inches, which is this size pan here. But I want to use this pan, which is 9.6 inches by 5.6 inches, because I like baking in this particular pan. So what I've done is I've taken the recipe from that website and I've adapted it a little bit. I've reduced the amount of sugar, I think, just a little bit, and I'm only using 1 egg, whereas with the increased volume of flour it might call for more than slightly more than 1 egg. And I've adjusted the water ratio as well, just a little bit, but it should work very well. If you only have a 9 by 5 pan, you can still make the recipe, but you might want to check the list of ingredients on the Farm and Feast website, because that list of ingredients was for that size pan. I also want to mention that if you only have a round cake tin, a 9-inch cake tin for instance, you can do it in that. You know, it just means that you'll have a round loaf rather than an oblong loaf, but it would still be a very, very tasty bread. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for this I have 550 grams, which is 3 2/3 cups, based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of bread flour. I have 265 milliliters, 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon plus 2 teaspoons of water, which I have warmed to about 40 degrees, which is 104 Celsius, which is 104 Fahrenheit. I have 7 grams, 1 packet of active dry yeast, 1 packet of active dry yeast. I have 4 grams, 3/4 teaspoon of salt. I have 23 grams, about 2.5 tablespoons of flavourless oil, 1 medium egg, which would be large in the USA, and I have 38 grams, 3 tablespoons of sugar. And what I'm going to do to start off with is to activate the yeast, and for that I'm going to put a teaspoon of sugar into the lukewarm water, and then I'm going to just put the active dry yeast in as well. I'll give it a little stir, and then I'm simply going to leave that for the yeast to become active in the water. That can take 5 or 10 minutes. But once the yeast is active in the water, I'll come back and we'll go on to the next steps. As you can see, my yeast is activated. It's gone nice and frothy now. So that's ready to use. So I'm going to put that into a large bowl, and I'm just going to scrape down the jug just to get any residue out. And then I'm going to add into that my egg and the oil, and the remaining sugar, and I'm just going to give those a little whisk around to get that egg broken up. like that. And then I'm going to put in the salt as well and most of the flour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold back maybe half a cup of the flour, and I'll put that in later. I'm sure I'll need it, but you may not need all of it. So I'm going to stir this around until it becomes a shaggy dough and it begins to pull away from the sides of the bowl, and it will start clumping into a ball, hopefully. And it did that very rapidly, so I'm going to put in some more of the flour. Just hold back a little bit more again. And that's clumping, but what I'm going to do is I'm not going to knead it particularly at this stage, but I'm just going to work it a little bit with my hand to make sure that the flour is incorporated. Just turning it over. And that looks quite good like that. It's tacky to the touch, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to cover that in some plastic wrap. And I'm going to put that in a warm place until it doubles in size. It may take up to an hour. It may take slightly longer than an hour. The important thing is that it looks as though it's doubled in size. And it would depend on the heat in the kitchen, basically. And as you can see, I have a little bit of flour left, so I haven't used all that flour because the water absorbed into the flour to the extent that I needed it to. So what I'll do is I'll cover that, as I said, and I'll leave it to double in size, and once it's doubled in size I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step, which is actually to knead it for a few minutes and then shape it into the loaf shape and put it in the tin for a second proof. I let my dough proof, and as you can see it's doubled in size quite easily, and it's wobbly if I shake it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it out onto a work surface, but I'm going to put some flour on the work surface first of all. I don't want to use too much, but enough so that I can work the dough. And then I'm simply going to tip this out onto it. Like that, and I'm going to put some flour on the top as well. What I want to do is I want to knead this for a few minutes until it's nice and stretchy, And if I need more flour on it, as it gets sticky, I'll put more flour on it. And so I've kneaded that for about 6 minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break a piece off like that, and I'm going to just roll it into a ball, and I'm going to try to stretch it out as thin as I can, and if I get to the point where it's not tearing but I can almost see through it, so this is known as the window pane test. And as you can see with that, you can almost see through that. It's nice and thin, like that. That means that it's probably kneaded enough. If yours tears like that, then it probably needs just another minute or two of kneading. So with that kneaded, I'm going to flatten it out into a rectangle, but as you can see, it's very springy at the moment. So what I want to do is just flatten it out, and then I'm going to leave it for a few minutes so that the gluten that has formed starts to relax. So just while I do that, I'll cover it up, and I'll be back in 5 minutes or so, and we'll go on to shape the dough and put it into the loaf tin. So it's been about 5 minutes, and I'm just going to stretch my dough out and as you can see, it's relaxed a little bit more now. And then I'm going to roll it up and I'm going to pinch the seams together . Like that, and I'm going to pick it up and put it into my pan . Like that, and I'm going to leave it in the pan, and I'm going to cover it with the same piece of plastic wrap which I have now greased. I'm just going to cover it, and I'm going to leave it like that, again for as long as it takes for the dough to rise up above the rim of the pan by about an inch. A little bit more wouldn't matter, but by about an inch. And once it's risen up to that level, I would have my oven preheated at 200 Celsius, that's 400 Fahrenheit, and this will be ready to go into the oven to bake. So I'll come back once it's risen, show you what it looks like, and I'll put it in the oven. The dough has been proofing now, and it's actually probably been about 40 minutes, and the oven is preheated, And as you can see, it's risen quite nicely above the pan. And so that's ready to go into the oven now. And I'm going to bake it for 25 to 30 minutes. If it seems to be browning too quickly on top towards the end, I will just cover it with some aluminium foil until it's baked to the requisite time. Then I'll test the internal temperature with my thermometer, and it should have reached between about 96 and 98 degrees Celsius, which is about 200 Fahrenheit, I think. And then when it's reached the temperature, I'll take it out of the oven and I'll come back and show you, because I'm just going to brush some butter on the top so that the crust on the top stays soft for sandwiches. So I'll be back with you when this is fully baked. So I baked my loaf, and I actually baked mine for 32 minutes. I tested it with the thermometer and it wasn't quite hot enough. So I left it for 32 minutes and it had got up to 95 degrees, which is ample. That takes you over 200 basically, about 203, 204, something like that, Fahrenheit. So that's good enough. And I've taken it out of the tin and I'm simply going to rub a little bit of butter on the top, like that. Not excessive amount, but just enough that will soak in, and it will just soften the crust a little bit, which will be perfect then for sandwiches. Now, I will say that I could have left mine to rise just a little bit higher in the tin before I put it in the oven, and the reason I know that is that it looks wonderful there, but if I turn it round, it's still perfectly fine, but there's a bit of a crack there. So that's telling me the dough wasn't risen quite enough in the tin, but it will make a perfect sandwich, I'm sure of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that now for it to cool completely, and then when it has cooled completely, I'll come back and I'm going to slice it and have a taste of it for you. I've allowed the bread to cool down and I've sliced some of it. So I'll show you what it looks like. And this is what it looks like sliced. Looks very, very good, I have to say. It's still slightly warm, I can feel that. But I'm going to put just a little bit of my spread on it. And I'm going to have a taste of it for you. So, I taste this piece. Has a lovely soft texture to it. It's very good indeed. It's very, very good indeed. Ideal for sandwiches, and also perfect, I would think, for French toast, for those people who like French toast. I wouldn't use it for French toast today because it's fresh and it's perfect for sandwiches. And stored in an airtight container, it would be good for a couple of days at least for sandwiches. But then, as it begins to go just that little bit stale, it would be perfect for French toast. So, that's going to be it for this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen, there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe. And I'll put a link below the video as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.